The galaxy had not seen war in generations. For so long, diplomacy and treaties had replaced weapons, and for most civilizations, the very concept of open conflict was treated like a primitive relic. Entire academies taught that violence was wasteful, irrational, beneath the dignity of advanced species. For countless years, fleets grew sleek and ceremonial, their firepower symbolic rather than practical, and their admirals more politicians than warriors. The Great Council of Species saw itself as the custodian of peace, and they congratulated themselves for the stability they had achieved. Humanity was a late arrival to this galactic stage. To most of the elder civilizations, Earth's people were an unremarkable species, tolerated rather than admired. Humans were diligent, adaptable, eager to prove themselves, but in the eyes of the Council, they lacked refinement. Their technology was not exceptional, their colonies modest, their fleets small. They were given a seat at the table only because they insisted on one, and because their persistence was too difficult to ignore. For many, humanity was convenient labor, a secondary partner in trade, never a strategic consideration. The idea that these people could one day matter in matters of war seemed absurd. Yet beneath that veneer of dismissal lay a quiet truth the galaxy never considered. For all their progress, humanity carried scars, long memories of conflict, an instinct carved by millennia of survival against themselves and their environment. Where other civilizations dismissed violence as a phase of evolution, humanity had never forgotten that survival was not guaranteed, that peace was fragile, and that war, however hated, was a constant shadow. It shaped their history, their psychology, and their unspoken readiness. When the first whispers arrived that a hostile fleet was moving on the outer colonies, the Council convened in grand chambers lit by symbols of unity. Debate filled the air for hours as species weighed treaties, trade impacts, and diplomatic strategies. Some argued that no attack could truly come, the galaxy was civilized, after all. Others suggested appeasement, negotiations, or endless inquiries. To them, the possibility of open battle was so alien, so impossible, that they hesitated to even name it. Their fleets were ceremonial, their defenses symbolic. For all their technological mastery, they had no practice in real conflict. The humans listened. They did not interrupt, nor did they posture. Delegates sat with silent eyes, absorbing every word as the Council tied itself in knots. And while the others spoke of patience and restraint, humanity's military command back on Earth began to move pieces on the board. Orders were issued, fleets redirected, reserves awakened. The urgency was not born from arrogance but from instinct. When danger is certain, hesitation is fatal. The invading force was unlike anything the galaxy had faced in centuries. Hardened by conquest, merciless in intent, they advanced with confidence born from countless victories. To them, the galaxy was soft, ripe for taking. They knew the Council would stall, that the great civilizations had long forgotten how to fight. It was why they came. They expected fear, paralysis, and surrender. And indeed, they almost received it. The Council fractured into arguments, unable to unite. Some voices urged immediate surrender of border systems to spare the core. Others declared neutrality, preferring to watch from afar. Fear spread quietly in private channels, but in public chambers, leaders cloaked it with language of diplomacy. It was a theater of denial, and the invaders closed in while the galaxy drowned in its own illusions. Only humanity broke the silence. Not with speeches, not with threats, but with motion. Their fleets, though modest compared to the grand empires, surged forward in disciplined formation. Their leaders did not wait for consensus, because they knew none would come. To the Council, it looked reckless. To the humans, it was survival. The other civilizations were baffled. Why commit so quickly? Why fight when negotiations had not even been attempted? But humanity had no illusions about the invaders' intentions. They recognized hunger, ambition, and brutality when they saw it. They had seen it before countless times, in countless forms. To them, the galaxy's long peace was an anomaly, not the natural order. As reports flowed in of humanity's preparations, the Council dismissed them as futile gestures. They believed no species could stand alone against such a force. They believed humanity was leaping to its own destruction. But the humans did not seek approval, nor permission. They moved because they knew hesitation would doom everyone. The quiet before the storm stretched across the stars, thick with disbelief and denial. Entire civilizations held their breath, certain the invaders would break through quickly and easily. And in those tense hours, humanity's preparations continued, invisible to those who did not understand the speed of a species that had spent its entire history living with war as a possibility. By the time the first enemy ships entered the border systems, humanity was already waiting. The invaders arrived as if they were certain of triumph. Their fleets filled the void with dark metal and predatory silence, each warship bristling with weapons designed not for deterrence but for devastation. Their reputation preceded them: civilizations consumed, colonies reduced to ash, survivors enslaved or erased. They were conquerors shaped entirely by war, hardened by campaigns where hesitation meant annihilation. Against them, the galaxy's polished fleets and ceremonial admirals seemed laughably inadequate. Confidence radiated from their commanders. They expected little resistance. The galaxy had grown soft, complacent, comfortable in the illusion that peace was permanent. To the invaders, the Council was a theater of weakness. They did not see guardians of stability. They saw prey wrapped in self-delusion. And so, their approach was neither cautious nor careful. It was bold, a declaration that the age of treaties and compromise had ended. When the first intercepted messages reached the council chambers, panic erupted beneath the polished formality. Delegates raised voices, not to plan, but to protect pride and position. One faction insisted the invaders sought negotiation and demanded patience. Another argued for appeasement, offering border worlds in exchange for temporary safety. A few called for mobilization, but their proposals drowned beneath the endless cascade of procedural objections. Entire hours vanished as leaders debated whether war was even possible. Every word revealed the truth the invaders already knew: the galaxy had forgotten how to fight. For centuries, their fleets had been more ceremonial than functional. Ships were beautiful, sleek, and powerful on paper, but commanded by officers with no experience beyond simulation and diplomacy. Logistics networks designed for parades and symbolic patrols would collapse under the demands of a real campaign. The Council's delay was not just cowardice, it was incapacity disguised as reason. Humanity observed without interruption. Delegates watched the chaos unfold while their military forces moved quietly and decisively. Communications between Earth and its colonies surged with orders delivered in clipped, efficient tones. Supply chains came alive, reserves were pulled from storage, and officers who had trained in simulations grounded in human history understood exactly what was coming. The Council argued about words while humanity acted on instinct. The invaders' first contact with humanity was almost incidental. A small colony world stood in their path, barely defended, with no valuable resources worth sparing. The expectation was simple: destruction, then movement onward. But the attackers did not find hesitation. They found resistance: outnumbered defenders refusing to flee, civilians arming themselves, small fleets holding lines they had no logical reason to hold. To the invaders, it was puzzling. To humanity, it was natural. Survival was not negotiated, it was fought for. Reports of these skirmishes reached the Council, yet even then, disbelief clouded their response. They could not fathom why humans would resist so recklessly. To them, survival meant compromise, adaptation, and avoidance of direct conflict. War was wasteful. But humanity's refusal to bow, their willingness to take losses in defense of what they considered theirs, was a language alien to the rest of the galaxy. It was not recklessness, it was resolve. Still, the invaders pressed on. They believed humanity's defiance would collapse under pressure. The scale of their fleets, the weight of their weapons, the brutality of their tactics, all of it seemed overwhelming. But what they did not understand was that humanity had already endured worse in its own history. Entire wars had been fought on Earth's soil with casualties beyond comprehension. Humanity's memory was long, and every conflict had left them sharper, harder, less willing to surrender. Back in the council chambers, paralysis continued. Each species calculated what surrender might cost, what neutrality might preserve, what alignment might risk. None wished to be the first to bleed. None, except the humans. They did not wait for unity because they never expected it. They moved alone, knowing that hesitation would make the difference between survival and extinction. The invaders saw arrogance in humanity's defiance. They saw overconfidence in the mobilization of fleets too small to match their own. What they could not see, what they could never predict, was that humanity's true weapon was not numbers, not technology, but the unyielding instinct to fight with total commitment. While others bargained and delayed, humans prepared with absolute clarity. This was not a negotiation, this was war. By the time the invaders closed on humanity's core defenses, the rest of the galaxy still debated terminology, still wrapped in procedures, still blind to the truth that would soon be undeniable. The war had already begun, and humanity was the only one ready to fight it. When the invasion met humanity in full, the battle unfolded with a speed the galaxy had never imagined possible. Orders issued on Earth were transmitted and executed in seconds, fleets shifted in coordinated movements across vast distances, and every unit responded with discipline honed not by ceremony but by a deeply ingrained culture of readiness. To the invaders, accustomed to slow campaigns against hesitant prey, the response was shocking. They expected fractured resistance. Instead, they encountered precision. The first strikes were not tentative skirmishes but overwhelming counterattacks aimed at disabling command ships, severing communication lines, and forcing confusion into the enemy's ranks. Humans had studied warfare not as a distant memory but as a living discipline. History books, simulations, and military academies had treated conflict as inevitable, and now that knowledge surged into action with brutal efficiency. Every lesson of past wars, speed, adaptability, decisive pressure, was applied without hesitation. Alien observers, tuned into the broadcasts of the engagement, watched in disbelief. Where other fleets would stagger into formation over hours, humanity acted within minutes. Where others would wait for consensus, humanity struck instantly, seizing initiative before the invaders could even finish deploying their strength. Every engagement was direct, relentless, and executed with a clarity that suggested this was not humanity's first war but merely its latest. The invaders had numbers and firepower, yet their advantage eroded under the weight of human ferocity. Human fleets fought not as isolated vessels but as extensions of a single will, shifting and responding faster than enemy commanders could adapt. A frigate destroyed here, a cruiser crippled there, yet always the human line reformed, pressing forward with unbreakable rhythm. Casualties mounted, but morale did not waver. Each loss seemed only to harden their resolve. What unsettled the enemy most was humanity's refusal to retreat. For a species long accustomed to preservation above sacrifice, the sight of defenders holding ground even when outgunned felt irrational, almost suicidal. Yet this was no blind desperation. It was strategy. By refusing to yield, humanity forced the invaders into costly exchanges, draining their momentum and fracturing their formations. It was war fought not with hesitation but with an understanding that survival required total commitment. As hours passed, the tide turned in ways the Council could not comprehend. They had believed the conflict would stretch for months, years even, if resistance held at all. Instead, decisive blows fell one after another, collapsing the invaders' command structure. Flagships burned, supply convoys vanished under coordinated strikes, and key leaders were silenced before they could regroup. Humanity's commanders drove the tempo higher with every victory, leaving no time for recovery. By the fourth hour, the invaders were no longer advancing, they were scattering. Their formations dissolved under pressure, ships retreating in disarray, discipline unraveling as fear spread through crews who had never encountered an enemy that struck so quickly, so mercilessly. Attempts to regroup failed, communications jammed, chain of command shattered. Against an opponent that refused to hesitate, the conquerors of countless systems found themselves unraveling. The fifth hour ended it. The remaining ships attempted withdrawal, but humanity pursued without pause, cutting down stragglers and ensuring no chance of renewed assault. Where others might have offered quarter, humans offered certainty. The message was unmistakable. Aggression against them would be answered not with negotiation, not with delay, but with finality. When silence returned to the stars, the war was over. In less than a single cycle, humanity had achieved what the rest of the galaxy believed impossible. The invaders, who had arrived in arrogant strength, were annihilated not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through a will to fight carried to its absolute conclusion. Observers across the galaxy struggled to process what they had witnessed. They had expected months of resistance at best, if not immediate collapse. Instead, they had seen a species dismantle an empire of conquest in 5 hours. To them, it was inconceivable. To humanity, it was inevitable. The war was not just won, it was defined. Humanity had shown that survival was not an abstract principle, not a subject for debate, but an instinct that demanded total action. In the span of hours, they had reshaped the meaning of power in the galaxy, proving that the true strength of a civilization was not in its fleets or its technology, but in its refusal to yield. The galaxy reeled in silence when the last enemy ship burned out. For civilizations that had measured time in centuries of peace, the concept of a war ending in less than a day was almost impossible to grasp. Reports circulated across communication networks faster than governments could contain them, each one confirming the same unshakable truth: the invaders were gone, destroyed in a fraction of the time expected. The council that had debated endlessly now sat stunned, unable to reconcile what had just unfolded. Questions erupted immediately. How had humanity, a species dismissed as inexperienced and insignificant, accomplished what no alliance of elder civilizations dared attempt? Analysts dissected every fragment of data, searching for explanations that fit their own frameworks. Some concluded that humanity must have hidden advanced weapons, secret fleets, or technologies previously unseen. Others speculated about reckless luck, a gamble that happened to succeed. Yet the evidence left no room for such simplifications. Humanity had acted decisively, with strategies anyone could study but few could execute, and their victory was not chance, it was design. For many, awe began to mingle with unease. Species that had long considered themselves the pinnacle of reason and stability now realized they had overlooked a truth resting in plain sight. Humanity was not special because of its machines, but because of its nature. In a galaxy softened by complacency, they alone had preserved a readiness forged by hardship, a willingness to risk everything rather than surrender anything. What others dismissed as recklessness was revealed as clarity. Diplomatic channels filled with new tones, praise, fear, and veiled warnings. Some hailed humanity as saviors who had delivered the galaxy from conquest before it began. They argued that without human intervention, the invaders would have crushed system after system until no council chamber remained. Gratitude poured in, but behind it was a growing recognition of danger. If humanity could destroy such a force in hours, what might they do if ever provoked by their allies? The elders of the great civilizations, accustomed to calculating risk in decades, suddenly faced an unpredictable element. To them, humanity's strength was not measurable in fleet tonnage or technological advantage. It was a strength born from their history, from a relentless drive that did not bend under pressure. This made them unpredictable, and unpredictability was something the Council feared above all else. A civilization that could not be deterred, persuaded, or stalled was a civilization that could not be controlled. Whispers spread in private assemblies. Should humanity be contained? Should limits be placed on their fleets, their weapons, their colonies? Yet even in those hushed debates, a new hesitation appeared. The galaxy had just witnessed what happened when humanity was threatened. To move against them, even politically, seemed to invite risks few were willing to shoulder. Fear and respect blended into something new, caution. Humanity, for its part, offered no speeches of conquest, no declarations of superiority. Their leaders made simple statements: the threat had been eliminated, and the galaxy was safer because of it. But in their words carried an undertone no one could mistake. They had not acted for glory. They had acted because survival demanded it, and if such a demand arose again, they would act the same way, regardless of approval or permission. That unspoken promise carried more weight than any fleet on parade. The Council struggled to restore its image of control, but the balance of power had shifted. Old assumptions about strength and weakness collapsed overnight. For centuries, the galaxy had measured civilization by refinement, diplomacy, and distance from primal struggle. Now a new standard had been set: the will to endure. Humanity had reintroduced the concept of war not as failure, but as proof of determination. The message was simple and unshakable: peace was precious, but survival came first. From that day, every alliance, every negotiation, every calculation included humanity as a factor that could no longer be dismissed. No matter how polite or cooperative they appeared, beneath their words lay the memory of 5 hours that had redrawn the boundaries of what was possible. The galaxy could not decide whether to celebrate or to fear, but it understood one truth with absolute clarity: humanity had changed the order forever. Victory came quickly, but it did not come without cost. The aftermath revealed scars across human fleets, destroyed ships, fallen soldiers, civilians who had chosen to fight and never returned. Humanity mourned them with solemn clarity, recognizing that even a 5-hour war carried a price paid in blood. There was no triumphal parade, no boastful celebration. Instead, there was the quiet acknowledgement of sacrifice, the recognition that peace had been preserved not by chance, but through lives willingly risked and lost. The galaxy observed this silence, and found it more unsettling than victory itself. Other species expected revelry or arrogance, but humanity displayed neither. They rebuilt with steady hands, repaired their fleets, and buried their dead. Their message was clear: war was never their desire, but when it was forced upon them, they would meet it without hesitation. That composure, that refusal to glorify destruction, gave their victory an even sharper edge. It was not hunger for power that drove them, it was the instinct to survive and protect. For the Council, this restraint carried a heavier weight than conquest ever could. They realized humanity did not seek to dominate, yet could not be dominated. Attempts to limit or disarm them faltered before they were spoken, because every delegate knew the truth: no rule or treaty could unmake what had already been proven. The galaxy had seen what humanity could achieve in the shortest span imaginable, and that knowledge alone reshaped every future negotiation. Fear lingered, but it was coupled with something deeper: reliance. Many species recognized that without humanity's intervention, their own worlds would already lie in ruin. They whispered gratitude even as they wrestled with unease. Some began to seek alliances, treaties, and partnerships, not out of trust but necessity. The balance had shifted, and ignoring humanity was no longer an option. Humanity, however, did not press for dominance. They demanded no tribute, no new territories, no special privileges in the Council. Their only declaration was simple: never mistake their patience for weakness. That phrase, repeated across transmissions and broadcasts, became a mantra the galaxy could not ignore. It was not a threat. It was a reminder, one that echoed louder than any fleet of warships. In private, alien scholars began studying humanity's history in detail. They traced wars fought on Earth across centuries, conflicts that dwarfed anything their own species had endured. They discovered stories of cities rebuilt from ashes, nations rising after devastation, people who endured famines, plagues, and destruction yet returned stronger. To them, it was bewildering. To humanity, it was ordinary. Survival had always been part of their story. The lesson spread, unsettling yet undeniable: technology could be matched, numbers could be balanced, but the will to endure could not be replicated. The 5-hour war had proven that a civilization willing to commit everything, even in the face of overwhelming odds, could shatter any opponent that underestimated it. That understanding left the galaxy divided, some inspired, others afraid, all forever changed. Among humans themselves, reflection carried a sober tone. They did not revel in the title others now gave them: saviors, warriors, predators. They carried forward with the knowledge that the cost of survival was eternal vigilance. Peace was precious but fragile, and they would not be lulled into forgetting that truth. Their soldiers returned home, their fleets repaired, but their readiness did not fade. If the galaxy had learned to fear their response, humanity had reaffirmed its responsibility to remember what had brought them here. The war was over, yet its shadow stretched far beyond the battlefield. In 5 hours, humanity had redefined the meaning of strength in the galaxy. Not through dominance, not through expansion, but through a single demonstration that when threatened, they would fight with everything, and they would win. The Council would never again look upon them as unremarkable, nor underestimate their resolve. The legacy of those hours became a quiet warning etched into every mind across the stars. Humanity was kind, cooperative, and patient, but beneath that lay a truth carved by millennia of struggle. If forced to fight, they would not stop until the danger was ended. That truth, once dismissed, now stood undeniable. And from that day on, no civilization in the galaxy ever doubted what humanity was capable of when survival was at stake.